All right, well, with that, good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Members, if you can please make your selections on the tablet. Chair, we have a quorum with 10 members present and 5 members absent.
Thank you very much. I want to begin this morning by taking a moment to recognize 4 members of our MTS light rail vehicle maintenance team whose quick actions saved a life. Last month, the driver suffered a medical emergency and crashed her vehicle near the Green Line here at 12th and Imperial, and that car burst into flames while she was still inside the vehicle. Without hesitation, our LRV maintenance crew, Joshua Mavaz, Dan Medellin, Jesse Warford, and Andrew Meisenholder ran toward the incident. They used the fire extinguishers to suppress the flames, and they pulled the woman to safety before the first responders even arrived. Their courage and their teamwork prevented what could have been a tragic outcome. And thanks to their swift response, the woman survived. No damage occurred to MTS property. This is another fine example of how MTS employees as public servants are willing to go above and beyond the call of duty to help our fellow residents. And on behalf of the entire board, I want to extend our deepest gratitude to these employees. Their actions embody the very best of public service. We are proud to recognize them today. We have commendations for them, and we'd like to invite them to join us up here at the podium. All right, that is the best way to start a meeting. We really appreciate all of what they did there. But let's begin with non-agenda public comment. This provides 2 minutes for anybody who'd like to comment on something that is not on today's agenda, but is within the purview of MTS. Clerk, do we have any non-agenda public comment?
We do. We have 4 public comments. Lorenzo Pimentel.
Hello, my name is Lorenzo Pimentel, and I'm here to reinstate an issue I had of last time where I'm still struggling to get picked up at my house and am instead being picked up at a different address. This wouldn't be as big of an issue as it is right now if it weren't for the fact that I have a lot of health issues pertaining to the weather. This summer, I was getting an eye appointment, and I have visual problems, and I had my eye dilated, so I couldn't exactly see where I was going. And the place that I was dropped off at is a busy street back to my house because it's a few it was like a quarter of a mile away from my house. So I had to navigate through the sidewalk without getting hit by any cars and, also trying to see where I'm going without crashing. I tried to ask if I could be dropped off at my house instead, but because it is out of services, it wasn't available, which is really hard for me because I need to travel safely, and it's kind of hard to do that when I can't really see very well. And I just want to make sure that I don't crash into anything or fall or something else happens that would be worse.
Jeannie Ames.
Hi, my name is Jeannie Ames. I'm Lorenzo Pimentel's mom. And I'm very passionate about son's safety. He has a heart condition. And there was a couple times where he was left behind in the hot sun, and that's not good for him. And as he has stated that, we lived on a busy street, and the sidewalk is not well maintained. There's weeds growing out. He could get caught and stuck, and he could probably fall. Also, uneven on the on the sidewalks as well. We live on a busy street where the speed limit is 55, and then the road that he goes to for them to pick up for them to pick him up is a lot of apartments, so the sidewalks are a lot of ups and downs for the driveways and stuff, and that's not safe for him as well. And when I say they, I meant the MTS. They always usually come up on and pass where we live all the time. When they want to drive to pick them up, they come down our street, which is only less than 200 yards more, just to get us to have them pick them up at his residence rather than drive. And then that's like 5, maybe even it's, I don't know the exact, but the next speaker does know the exact amount of it. It's further away from the house, further from the turn of where they would pick him up.
Your time is up, ma'am. Jacqueline Romero, please make your way to the podium.
Good morning, members of the board and community. My name is Jacqueline Romero. I'm Lorenzo Pimentel's case manager and teacher at Trace School. This young man wants to be a voice actor. Once he gets his high school diploma, wants to go on and attend community college classes in San Diego Unified. Driving to and from work, honestly, is something we take for granted every single day. Lorenzo has a heart condition. His lung has collapsed. We were here at a meeting in March 2025 this year, advocating for this young man to get door-to-door service that MTS Access provides. I have several other students on my caseload that get this service. It's amazing, and I'm so thankful, and I'm thankful that Lorenzo does have access. I did give everybody a handout. We're talking 0.3 miles. So I don't think people understand MTS Access is the door-to-door service in San Diego Unified for people with disabilities who aren't able to safely access the community. This is an amazing service, and I advocate for people to have this. However, Lorenzo does not pick him up at his home. He has to go down a street, 0.3 miles, and around. He has to wait outside in the sun. There's no shade. If his temperature rises above 81 degrees, I believe it is, his heart is at risk. His lung has collapsed. He's blind in one eye. So I'm just thinking of all of you. If you had that, and again, I always think of if we had a family member, I would hope that you would be in the same position I am advocating for this. My ask today to this board, I invite any of you to come out, spend a day with me and Lorenzo. Come and see what this path looks like. Wait for the bus with us. See what he does even at school if you have that time in your day. But my ask today is for the board to reconsider and make an exception for MTS Access to pick him up at his home and drop him off at his home for purposes of his safety. And honestly, this is a life-threatening.
Your time is up.
So thank you for your time today.
Nate Fairman, if you can please make your way to the podium.
Happy holidays. Nate Fairman from IBW 465, representing hundreds of employees right here at MTS. My ask for you today is simple. Let's continue our partnership and improve our mechanic training program so we're prepared for the future. Look, I'm extremely proud of our JAC program here at MTS, but as new technologies continue to change our industry, we must do everything in our power to remain leaders in this space, especially as we adopt more and more battery electric buses. That's why this opportunity is so important. We've been meeting with MTS staff, Jeff Stumbo, Mike Wagnett, Tom Pasquarelli, Dr. Kimberly Moore from the Clean Technology Training Trust to form this partnership. As a partner with the Training Trust, we would play a vital role in shaping the nation's transportation vision, positioning MTS as a leader, an innovator, and a trusted partner in building a future-ready workplace. The handouts I provided outline the program, but I want to highlight a few of the benefits. This partnership would help us pursue state and federal grants, investments, and real industry needs and funding opportunities. This partnership will help us create a national apprenticeship and training standard that reflects real industry needs. And we would build a blueprint for the future by participating in the first national apprenticeship model for clean transportation. MTS would be able to appoint a trustee, helping guide the Trust's national labor management strategy to provide direct input on training, design, and industry needs. This is a natural fit for us as an agency. We work today through industry coalitions like APTA, but this would be a strategic focus on emerging technologies and training. By partnering with the Trust, MTS would gain more than a seat at the table. We would help build the table. Together, we can shape future-ready workforce that drives productivity, competitiveness, and national progress. We encourage directors to follow up with us or staff to gain more information and insight. You can even join us at our next partnership Zoom meeting, which is on Monday, December 1st. Now is not the time to step back in training. We must not be left behind in our industry as it changes around us. Let's lean in and let's be leaders. Thank you very much for everything you do.
Javier Haros, if you can please unmute yourself.
Hi, hello, how you doing? My name's Javier Haros. I'm here from Holiday Gardens HOA. I'm not certain this is probably the correct form or not. Just thought I'd join to voice my concern. I submitted a packet be late yesterday. I know it says before 4 p.m., but I thought I'd try to get it in there anyway. My concern is we have an access path, a pedestrian access way from our community into the MTS parking lot. Recently, well, it has become a safety concern for this community for quite some time now, since crime has significantly increased in the past years. But I would say now more than ever. And my ask was that the board read the packet that I submitted in the email to the clerk and give it some thought about maybe closing off that pathway or controlling access to it. In the past, historically, that walkway, that pedestrian access was closed off originally. It was actually some time ago, I don't have the dates, I tried to look them up, but it was opened up at the Holiday Gardens HOA request. And now that times have changed, we're, I guess, coming back to the board, asking if it could be closed
Your time
off.
is up.
Yeah. Thank you.
David Gents, please unmute yourself. David, if you can please unmute yourself.
Hello, my name is David Jentz. I'm at the same association as Javier, who previously speaker. Yeah, basically, we're asking at our expense to close this pedestrian walkway. Our association is between G and H Street in Chula Vista, and we're essentially adjacent to the MTS trolley station parking lot and on the H Street in Chula Vista. And this is a cul-de-sac. It's not very well traveled where the pedestrian walkway connects to, other than by pedestrians. And we think by closing this gate or by fencing off this gate, essentially pedestrians would go down more well-lit streets, and it would cause less issues for us as a HOA. And as Javier mentioned, this was historically closed. We're just asking to reclose it at our expense, if there's any way to possibly do that. That's all I had. Thank you.
That concludes public comments, Chair.
Thank you, Clerk. And thank you to the two callers from Chula Vista and the speakers here in the room, Mr. Fairman, Lorenzo, those here advocating for you. We appreciate you being here and speaking with the board this morning. Let's move on to our consent items. The consent agenda includes items 3 through 15. Clerk, is there any public comment on the consent items?
We have no public comments, Chair.
All right, let's see if we have a motion on the consent items. We'll begin with Director Moreno.
Thank you, and happy to move the consent agenda. And I do have comments on item number 9, but I don't wish to pull them over. Is this a good time?
It is.
Wonderful, thank you. Item number 9 is fiscal year 25-26 FTA section 5304, strategic partnership transit grant via the Caltrans Sustainable Transportation Planning Grant Program. I want to express my strong support for this item. The Otay Mesa East Transit Planning Study is long overdue, and I'm very glad to see it move forward. Otay Mesa is one of the fastest growing areas of our region. Thousands of new homes, new industrial corridors, and large-scale commercial development are already underway. Yet our transit network has not kept pace with that growth. The Otay Mesa Port of Entry processed more than $60 billion in commerce last year. And constituents in Otay Mesa have been very clear. The lack of adequate transit limits access to jobs, education, healthcare, and just general opportunities. So for several years, I have been pushing for MTS to place real focus on this part of the region. And the study will finally give us the data and planning framework we need to correct years of underservice. It will identify the routes, frequencies, and infrastructure improvements needed, including bus lanes, queue jumps, and signal priorities to make transit in Otay Mesa reliable and also competitive. It would also tell us what resources we need: buses, operators, vehicles, staffing, and funding, so we can plan responsibly for future service expansion and ensure that transit improvements match the pace of growth in this area. I am a stickler when it comes to staff, right? I'm very direct. And I definitely want to give my sincere thank you to staff. This particular item was pulled from another, I think it was a budget, CIP, it was a budget. And I want to thank you. You guys said we're going to bring it forward in a grant, and you guys made it happen. So I definitely want to give kudos to staff on making this come to fruition and seeking and receiving this grant. So I'm proud to support this study and appreciate staff for their hard work. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Moreno. We have a motion from Director Moreno. We have a second from Director Hall.
Officially second.
To approve the consent agenda. Thank you. Any further discussion on the consent items? Seeing no further discussion, Clerk, please take the vote.
Members, if you can please make your selections on your tablet. The motion passes with 13 members voting yes and 2 members absent.
Thank you, Clerk. All right, we'll move to item 16. That is the appointment of an ad hoc nominating committee for recommending appointments to MTS committees for 2026. This is something that we do every year. We get a few volunteers on an ad hoc committee to find out who is interested in serving on various standing committees next year. The ad hoc committee will meet next month. We'll bring a recommendation to the board in January. I've heard from directors Elo, Rivera, and Moreno, who I think are willing to serve on the ad hoc committee in addition to myself. Is there anybody else who's interested in serving on that ad hoc committee? Okay, we have Vice Chair Goebel willing to serve on that. I'll serve. Director Hall, and the Chair Pro Tem. Okay, I think that is the number that we're able to have on that committee. Let me just check here real quick. If there is anybody else interested, we would be able to take one more. Okay.
I think it would be allowed, but
I mean, it's up to the board to decide who's on the ad hoc nominating committee. But generally the people that get put on committees are primary members of the board, so they can report back to the board and and use their discussions at committees or, to lead their discussions at the board. But we have a history of, on the Public Security Committee, we do have another alternate that is a member of that committee.
Okay. All right. Do we, Director McCann?
I was just going to say, I'd be happy to be on the committee if there is a need.
Okay. We'll do that then. Will you let us know, I mean, if there is a committee that you would like to serve on or committees, we would like to know that for the ad hoc nominating committee. All right.
I just want to point out that I was the mayor of San Diego's alternate, and I was also the budget chair. So it is up to the discretion of the board. I want to advocate.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. Do we have any public comment on this item?
We have no public comments, Chair.
Okay. The names that I have on the list here, it is limited to 7. We have directors Elo Rivera, Moreno, Vice Chair Goebel, Director Hall. I can't read my writing. Oh, yes, the Chair Pro Tem Montgomery Stepp, yes. I wrote it quickly, yes. And we have Director McCann. Okay, good. Those are the 7 names that we have. 7 is the most we can have. Is there any further discussion on this item? We did take public comment. There was no public comment. Okay, seeing no further discussion, and with those 7 names on the ad hoc committee, clerk, please take the roll.
Members, if you can please make your selections on your tablet. The motion passes with 13 members voting yes and 2 members absent.
Okay, thank you very much, clerk. Thank you to everybody who volunteered to serve on that ad hoc committee. We will be following up to set up a meeting in the coming days or week. All right, let's move on to item 17. That is the audit results and draft of the fiscal year 2025 annual comprehensive financial report. Erin Dunn is going to get us started on this item. Please feel free to get settled in and begin the presentation whenever you're ready.
Good morning, Chair. My name is Erin Dunn. I'm the controller here at MTS. This is Jennifer Pentoney, our assistant controller, and Suzette Reyes from the Poon Group. Last week, we presented to the Audit Oversight and Joint EC and Audit Oversight Committee our audit, our results, key financial indicators, and a draft of the ACFR. Today, we have our final ACFR, and we have Suzette here to do a similar presentation, so apologies if you were here last week. And then she'll answer any questions you might have.
Good morning, all members of the board and everyone. Thank you, Erin. I am Suzette Reyes from the Penn Group, the engagement manager for the audit of 2025. Coley Delaney, the engagement partner, he is unable to attend, so I'm going to present the 2025 audit on the San Diego MTS. So what I'll go through today is the management and auditors' responsibilities and the overview of the financial statements, since the report is almost 200 pages, and then the key pension and OPEB information, and of course, the audit result. First is the management responsibilities. Management is responsible in the preparation and fair presentation of the financial statements in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America. Management is also responsible in the design, implementation, and maintenance of internal control relevant to the preparation and fair presentation of the financial statements that are free from material misstatement, whether due to fraud or error. Also evaluate whether there are conditions or events that raise substantial doubt about MTS's ability to continue as a going concern for 12 months beyond the financial statements date, that's June 30, 2025, including any currently known information that may raise substantial doubt shortly thereafter. So as auditors, we are responsible to form and express an opinion about whether the financial statements are presented fairly in all material respects in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America. We are also responsible to plan and perform the audit to obtain reasonableness assurance, not absolute assurance, about whether the financial statements are free from material misstatements. Also to obtain an understanding of internal control relevant to the audit in order to design audit procedures that are appropriate in the circumstances, but not for the purpose of expressing an opinion on the effectiveness of the MT's internal control. So accordingly, no such opinions is expressed. We are also responsible to exercise professional judgment and maintain professional skepticism throughout the audit, and also identify and assess the risk of material misstatement of the financial statements, whether due to fraud or error, and design and perform the audit procedures responsive to those risks. So such procedures include examining on a test basis the evidence regarding the amounts and disclosures in the financial statements. We are also responsible to evaluate the appropriateness of accounting policies used and the reasonableness of significant accounting estimates made by management, as well as evaluate the overall presentation of the financial statements. And lastly, we are responsible to conclude whether there are conditions or events considered in the aggregate that raise substantial doubt about the MTS ability to continue as a going concern for a reasonable period of time. So the next slides of the financial statements, the next slides will be the overview of the financial statements. So looking here is the summary statements of the net position, which is the primary government. So the primary government is MTS. So this does not include the STTC employee retirement plan. So the increase in current asset of 210 million is mainly due to 177 million increase in cash and investment. The decrease in non-current asset of 117 million is due mainly for the decrease in non-current asset was mainly due to the depreciation on capital asset. So the deferred outflows of resources decreased by 16 million is due to the pension deferred outflows decreased by 15.5 million in 2025. So the current liabilities increase in 185 million is due to the unearned revenue, as MTS has 177 million of unearned revenue related to the state SB 125 funding this year. So the non-current liabilities decreased by 10.4 million, mainly due to a decrease of 10.5 million in the aggregate net pension liability. And then the deferred inflows of resources decrease as stayed relatively static over year over year. And then that total net position is decreased by 98 million from last year, as we'll see on the next slide. So as you can see, there's an increase in the 10 million in operating revenues, mainly due to an increase in the passenger revenue of 5.5 million. And also there is small changes in the miscellaneous and advertising revenues that made up the rest of the year over year change. And then the operating revenues decreased by 22.9 million is due to the decrease by federal revenue decreased by 36 million. And then there's a Transnet revenue increase by 19 million and state of good repair funding increased by 8 million. So the operating expenses, we saw an increase of 25 million. That was mainly due to the 12 million increase in personnel costs and a 14 million increase in outside services. So non-operating expenses decreased by 38 million due to a loss on disposal of capital asset being only 2 million this year versus 17 million last year. Also, there was no reduction in contributed capital from Sandag recognized this year, while 21 million reduction was recorded in fiscal year 2024. And lastly, the capital contributions from Sandag decreased by almost 20 million versus the 2024 fiscal year. So the total change in net position was negative 98 million for 2025. So here is the summary of the statement of cash flows for the primary government, which is the MTS. So the operating activities, this category represents receipts from customers, payments of suppliers, payments to suppliers, payments to employees, and payments for claims. So this decreased by 52 million versus that in 2024, as cash paid to suppliers and employees made up the majority of the difference. So the non-capital financing, this category consists of public support such as federal grants, TDA, TSA, Transnet funds, etc. So the cash flows in this category increased by 131 million in 2025 versus the 2024. Sorry about that. Capital and related financing. So there was a decrease in cash outflows this year because of the 66 billion, because property acquisition dipped from 161 million in 2024 to 92 million in 2025. And then cash flows from investing activities shows interest received on investment, which decreased slightly in 2025 versus 2024. So overall, MTS recorded an increase in cash and cash equivalents of 177 million in 2025 compared to a 34 million in increase in 2024. So here we have the summary of the statements of fiduciary net position, which is the SDTC Employee Retirement Plan. So the assets are made up of plan investment, which increased 14 million in 2025 versus 2024. And then the liabilities consist of amounts due to MTS, the plan sponsor at June 30th, and the other miscellaneous payables. So the net position increased 14.9 million in 2025. And then here is the comparative schedule of the statement of changes in fiduciary net position. Again, for the SDTC Employee Retirement Plan. So the net investment income in 2025 consisted of 13 million in realized and unrealized gains, plus 4.9 million of dividend earnings, while the net investment income in 2024 consisted of 9.2 million in realized and unrealized gains, plus the 5.2 million of dividend earnings. The total increase there was 4.6 million. So distributions to plan participants increased slightly, and we ended with a positive change in net position of 14.9 million in 2025 versus 9.8 million in 2024. Next is the key pension and OPEB information. So this schedule shows us the net liability sensitivity to potential changes in the actuarial calculation input of discount rate, and how the liability would change if, all the things being equal, the discount rate was changed by plus or minus 1%. So MTS and STTI plans uses 6.9% as a discount rate per CalPERS, and then PARS and SDTC plan use more conservative 6%. So this schedule shows us MTS aggregate net pension liability of 280 million. Yeah, and then if the discount rate was decreased by 1%, the liability would increase to over 300 million. And in less likely case that the discount rate was increased by 1%, again, all other inputs being unchanged, the aggregate net pension liability would fall to 150 million, which is half of what it would be with a 1% decrease in the discount rate. So MTS plan is at 77.67 funded compared to 75.35% funded last year. So it went up slightly. Then the STTC is at 55.50 funded compared to 53.43% funded last year. Slight increase again. And then the SDTI Spurs plan is at 81% funded this year compared to 77.73% funded last year's. And over a 3% increase. And then the SDTI PARS plan is at 83.27% funded compared to 78.9% funded. So an increase of over 4%. So they are all trending in the right direction this year. So and then the total expense across all plan was 35.2 million in 2025 compared to 36 million in 2024, a slight 1.5 decrease this year. Then similar to the pension sensitivity schedule we showed a minute ago, this schedule shows the sensitivity of the OPEB liability to a plus or minus 1% the discount rate. So the discount rate used for the OPEB liability calculation is the average of the range of 3 to 20-year municipal bond indices since MTS does not have any plan assets. So the rate of 4.21 this year increased slightly from 4.13% in 2024. And this rate is much more susceptible to change up or down on an annual basis than the pension discount rates. So MTS aggregate OPEB liability is 41.2 million, but could swing upward to 48 million or downwards to 35 million with a plus or minus 1% change on to the rate. Then the OPEB expense of slightly under $1 million fell by about $500,000 in 2025 compared to last year. And then non-federal agencies like MTS that expend more 750 of federal awards in a fiscal year are required to undergo a single audit of their federal programs. So in 2025, MTS spent 149.5 million federal awards, and 148 of that was of federal transit cluster funding, which was selected as a major program as it is every year due to its size. And then we do not have any findings in the internal control over compliance or compliance with the federal grant awards were noted. So there's no findings. However, while the single audit report is essentially completed by now, we are not allowed to issue until the Office of Management and Budget finalizes their 2025 OMB compliance supplement. So there is currently no timetable for its release, but we are monitoring it very closely. And of course, with the audit results, we issued the unmodified opinion, the highest assurance. So what is the unmodified opinion mean? So the unmodified opinion means that the financial statements are fairly presented in all material respects, and then significant accounting policies have been consistently applied, estimates are reasonable, disclosures are properly reflected in the financial statements, and then we have no disagreements with management, and then there is no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in internal control were noted, and there is no accounting issues noted. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you for allowing us to continually serve MTS.
Thank you for the presentation. Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
No public comments, Chair.
Okay, we will now open board discussion on this item. If there is any, this is an informational item, so no motion is necessary. We're going to start by going to Vice Chair Goebel, who has a series of questions that we always ask in regards to this.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Reyes, did Mr. Delaney give you these 13 questions so you're ready?
Yes.
Sounds good. Okay, during the audit, were you giving full access to any employee that you needed to talk to for the purposes of preparing the audit?
Yes, we were given full access to any employees we wish to talk to.
Did you ever ask for access to an employee that you felt necessary to complete your audit and were denied access to that employee?
This did not occur.
Were you given full access to any documents, including ledgers and financial statements, and financial documents for the purpose of preparing your audit?
Yes, actually MTS also provided us the read access to the accounting system so we can look things up ourselves, whatever we want.
Did you find any financial practices being used by staff or executives to not be consistent with the best practices of accounting?
No.
What is your overall assessment of the quality of the accounting, internal controls, and the competency of staff?
Overall, MTS does a very good job with designing and implementing an internal control over financial reporting and compliances. So in the 2025 audit, we did not record any audit adjusting journal entries.
How did you maintain independence during the course of the audit?
So we maintain objectivity and professional skepticism all throughout the audit, and we are independent from MTS in both mind and appearance. Also, we do not perform any non-audit services for MTS, and we refrain from participating in management decisions. So we have no financial or employment interest in MTS and the employee or firm levels. Also in 2025, we also changed the audit team to avoid familiarity threat with MTS. Also, we also assign a quality control reviewer that is not a member of the audit team to perform additional review of the audit and all the reports that gets audited or issued.
Thank you. Were there any accounting issues on which you sought the advice of other audit firms or regulatory bodies?
There were none.
Is it your opinion that this audit and MTS's financial record keeping deserves an unmodified opinion?
Yes.
What is the alternative to an unmodified opinion?
So alternatively, we could have issued a qualified opinion, so which states that the financial statements are fairly presented except for specific issues that materially affect the financial statements. So we could also have issued an adverse opinion, which states that the financial statements are not materially fairly stated. And finally, we could have issued a disclaimer of opinion. So where we cannot form an opinion of the financial on the financial statements due to scope limitations or other issues that prevent us from gathering sufficient appropriate audit evidence.
Thank you. How many years has your company been conducting finance audits for MTS?
The Penn Group has been auditing MTS since its founding in 2012.
Have you ever found an MTS audit that you did not ultimately conclude that it would be an unmodified opinion?
No.
And finally, are there any new pronouncements and or risks affecting future financial statements which the board should be aware of?
Yes, so both GASB 103, the financial reporting model improvements, and statements 104, disclosures of certain capital assets, which are mentioned also in the note 1R of the 2025 ACFR, will be effective in the fiscal year 2026. But they are expected to have a minor effect on MTS financial statements.
Okay, thank you for presentation. Good work. Congratulations to Mr. Maronese and your team for an unmodified opinion. Well done.
Thank you, Vice Chair Goebel, for walking us through those questions. Thank you for the responses. Let's go to Director Downey.
I just want to thank staff. I've been reviewing audits for 25 years of governments, and it is always wonderful when there is no corrections, nothing that has to be fixed. So kudos to everybody that works on it. I know it is a dragging amount of time. So congratulations on a job well done.
Thank you, Director Downey. Seeing no further discussion, I will echo the congratulations to the financial team on the clean audit. All right, let's move to item 18. That is the fiscal year 2025 final operating budget results. And we're going to be handing it over to Gordon Meyer for the presentation. Feel free to get settled in and begin your presentation whenever you're ready.
It's not going. So first we'll look at the operating revenues, and the primary operating revenue source for us is fare revenue. So here we finished the year with 78 million. That was almost 2 million unfavorable to budget, or 2.4%. Main driver here was that we missed on our average fare assumption. If you'll remember back to the mid-year amendment in February, we had increased our assumption for average fare based on the new fare enforcement that had started in February and the changes to that policy. We did not hit our average fare assumption, and so we saw that in the final passenger revenue performance. Although we missed average fare, there was good news. In FY25, our revenue year over year was 5.5 million favorable, or 7.6% higher. Ridership was also about 5.2 million passengers higher, or almost 7% higher than the year before. Next line, we have other operating revenue. So here we finished the year with 36 million, or about $1 million favorable to budget. The main drivers were interest revenue, rental income, as well as miscellaneous income. Worth mentioning that we did significantly miss our budget for energy credits, specifically the low carbon fuel standard program. We did see a significant decrease in those credit prices. They came in at around $45 versus $70, so we did have a miss there. So overall operating revenues ended at 114 million, or about 886,000 unfavorable to budget. It's less than a 1% unfavorable variance. Moving on to expenses. So personnel costs is one of our larger variances, a 1.3 million favorable, less than 1%. But we had some favorable paid absences within bus operations, and then also favorable security wages, as well as the hiring for those additional SB 125 funded positions has been slower, and we're still not fully staffed today. So we've been seeing some wage savings there. Other outside services, this is our largest variance this year, came in favorable at about $3 million, or 5.5%. This was some larger variances across multiple departments, but primarily IT costs within administration. And then we had several departments within trolley operations have favorable repair and maintenance costs as well. Energy, so this was a good one this year. We came in favorable 2.7 million, or 5.6%. That was favorable commodity rates for both electricity and CNG. Other expenses, that's the last line here, were favorable by 1.9 million. This includes risk management, materials, as well as general administration costs as well. As the main driver here was we had favorable revenue vehicle parts within rail operations. So overall operating expenses came in 8.5 million favorable to our adopted budget, or almost 2%. So here you can see our operating activities combined. So we ended the year with a net operating variance of negative 326 million. So that's the number that needs to be covered with subsidy revenue, which is the next portion of the budget that we'll get to. That was about 7.6 million favorable to what we had budgeted. So now we'll cover the subsidy revenue. That's the last portion of our overall MTS operating budget. Before we look at the numbers, give a very brief overview of the different categories. So first we have federal, that's our recurring FTA funds. So that's our formula funds, includes things like 5307, 5337. Federal stimulus funds. So here we've received 360 million in total from both the CARES and ARP pots. We did our final drawdown of stimulus funds in FY25 for 47 million. If you'll remember back to 2023, we had decided that we were going to start drawing those expenses based on eligibility of costs rather than fiscal need. And so we were drawing them faster than we needed to. Those excess stimulus funds were being put into a newly created operating deficit reserve. So although we don't have any stimulus funds left to draw, we do still have about 68 million in the operating deficit reserve, which originated from those stimulus funds. Next, we have Transportation Development Act, or TDA. That's a local sales tax. It's the 1/4% regional sales tax that's administered by both Sandag and the county. Our other local sales tax is Transnet. So that's the half-cent sales tax that's specific to transportation projects in the region. We receive 2 pots of Transnet. There's the formula share, which is a direct monthly payment dependent upon sales tax performance for that month. And then we also receive a direct reimbursement from SANDAG for our BRT and Midcoast operations that were specifically funded in the Transnet ordinance. So we receive 100% cost recovery for those as long as Transnet has available funding. STA, that's the state sales tax on diesel fuel. It's distributed based on a formula. And then lastly, we have SB 125 revenue, which is the $4 billion in state TIRCP funding that we received a couple of years ago as a kind of non-recurring effort to help transit agencies throughout California. And for the first time, we could use it for operations as we have included in our budget. So here's the actual performance. I'll just skip through and only talk about the larger ones, but our federal recurring revenues were 1.4 million unfavorable to budget. That's because we were unable to utilize all of our 5337, which is the FTA formula fund that can only be used for rail preventive maintenance if you're using it for operations. So due to those favorable cost variances within rail, we weren't able to justify the drawdown that we had planned on. And so we're not losing that funding. It carries over to this year's apportionment, but it does show as an unfavorable variance this year. TDA, we came in favorable 2.3 million. So this is pretty good news. So last year we had the original adopted budget. And then when we were doing the mid-year amendment, SANDAG provided us with a new forecast that was quite a bit lower than what we had originally built. And so at the end of the year, we actually ended up receiving the full original budget claim amount because the cash receipts came in at the originally planned levels. And so that mid-year forecast that was provided was, it was too pessimistic. And so that was good news, something that helps us out this year. And also that we're hoping can help us out with our longer term forecast as well. Transnet, that's our other local sales tax, also performed better than that revised forecast at mid-year. So we came in 714,000 favorable there. So overall subsidy revenue came in at just under 310 million, about 1.5 million favorable to budget. Next line, we have reserves. So it shows as an unfavorable variance of 5.8 million. This is actually a good thing. It means that we planned on using 25 million from our operating deficit reserve. Instead, we only needed to use 19 million. And so we used 5.8 million less in reserves than we had planned on. So overall, the non-operating revenues and expenses came in at 329 million versus a budget of 333. So about 4.3 million less than budget. But once again, that's a good thing because it's being driven by using less reserves than planned. So here, this is the main takeaway slide. This is our entire operating budget combined. So the operating and non-operating activities combined. And so you can see our recurring revenues came in at 367 million or 563,000 favorable to budget. Our expenses were 8.5 million favorable. So based on those, our structural deficit was 72.5 million for FY25, and that was 9 million less than what we had projected in the budget. So some of that's structural and will carry forward to our current fiscal year and beyond. So that was good to see. In order to get to our overall budget performance, we add in the one-time non-recurring funds. So for us, that's the reserves. There's that 19 million that we used from reserves. The 47 million, it's the last stimulus payment. And then we used 9 million in SB 125 funding as well. So with those included, our final bottom line figure for FY25 was 3.3 million in excess revenues over expenses. So that's where we lead to our recommendation that we'll get to at the end. We need to figure out how we want to program that. And so before we get to the recommendation, I want to talk about the contingency reserve balance. So just a reminder, our board policy is that we set the target at 12.5% of the current year operating budget. So we're talking about FY26. After adjusting for some of the Transnet funded activities, that target is 52.5 million. Now, at the beginning of FY '25, our reserve balance was 48.8 million. And now that we completed FY '25, we need to add in the favorable results that we received. And so we had the 3.3 million favorable revenues over expenses. We do a small interest adjustment. Some of that interest goes to the self-funded entities that are under the MTS umbrella. That includes the taxi or for-hire vehicle administration, as well as the SD&AE railroad. After that small adjustment, we have 2.9 million that we need to program. And so staff are recommending that we allocate all of the 2.9 million to the contingency reserve, which would put the contingency reserve at 51.7 million or 12.3% of the FY '26 operating budget. So we would be below our target, but we're allocating everything that we can right now to the contingency reserve. And just want to differentiate there, we have the contingency reserve, and then we also have the operating deficit reserve. The operating deficit reserve currently has 68 million, and that's what we'll be using to balance our budget for the next year, couple of years. And then the contingency reserve is truly like the emergency reserve that we wouldn't plan on using it to balance our budgets, but just wanted to differentiate between that. And so that brings me to the recommendation that the San Diego Metropolitan Transit System Board of Directors approve the allocation of 2.9 million in excess revenues over expenses in FY '25 to the contingency reserve. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. The executive committee heard this item and recommended that the board adopt this recommendation. Let's go and see if we have any public comment on this item, Clerk.
No public comments, Chair.
Okay, we'll open it up to board discussion on this item. This is an action item, so we will take a motion and a second on the staff recommendation. I am happy to kick things off and make the motion that we accept the staff recommendation. And we'll open it up to a second. If there is one, there is a second from Director Downey. Is there any further discussion on the motion, which is to accept the recommendation? Seeing none, Clerk, please call the vote.
Members, please make the selection on your tablets. Have one more member to vote. The motion passes with 13 members voting yes and 2 members absent.
Thank you very much, Clerk. All right, let's move on to item 19. That is on MTS financial sustainability. And Mike Thompson is going to kick off this presentation.
Good morning. This is a continuation of an item we brought to the board in September. In general, we're looking for some high-level strategic direction for fiscal planning purposes for this next budget cycle coming forward. Just as a reminder, our goal is to realign our recurring revenues and recurring expenses before non-recurring revenues are depleted. As Gordon just mentioned, we do have a large structural deficit that we need to really bridge that gap and bring those back into alignment. This is just guidance for staff to address these things beginning with this next development cycle that I talked about. Decisions are not being made today. All these items will still come back to the board in future times. We're just looking for general direction here, what options really are available for staff consideration. We wanted to quickly go over the current guidance that we've received from the board. This is basically from about last February. There was a couple different agenda items that meeting, and there was some direction given to the board, and I'll just summarize some of it. First one was to pursue a comprehensive operational analysis, or COA. That'll be completed next year. Begin the preliminary efforts of researching the feasibility of placing a transit revenue measure for the MTS service area on the ballot for November of 2026. And then work with SANDAG and NTTD on conducting a fare study. We also exercise some innovative clean transit off-ramp provisions to delay the implementation of some of our battery electric bus transition. We also planned on shifting flexible funds from the capital improvement program to the operating budget. And that began with the fiscal year 26. So the current year, we took 25 million out of the capital budget and put in the operating budget. The plan at this time was to put 35 million for 27 from capital to operations, and then 50 million in 28 from capital to operations. And lastly, the direction is to maintain service levels at January, not really adding any service at this time due to our fiscal condition. Another current situation is we've been trying to maximize our non-fair revenues. This has been an emphasis of the agency for probably since the Great Recession, over 10, 15 years. And you can see the chart on the right, how we have grown these revenues is $8 million in total in fiscal year 14. It'll be $25 million in fiscal year 26, so it has grown substantially. We've been always pursuing opportunities around naming rights, vehicle advertising, shelter and bench advertising, as well as digital information boards. And you can see the advertising has grown from 2 million to 8 million over this period of time. So that is something we're still working on always to try to maximize these revenues. And the next slide sort of brings together, this is what the picture looked like in the spring. This is our budget and the 5-year projection we presented last May. And you can see we have recurring revenues for fiscal year 26 of $365 million. We have recurring expenses of $473 million in this budget. So that is what we consider our structural deficit. The recurring revenues and recurring expenses there's a large gap there. We do have one-time funding in place to balance not only fiscal year 26, but looking forward, we should be able to balance 27 and 28 with the existing direction from the board and last budget cycle. But after that, we do not have a way today of saying how we're going to balance those budgets in 29 and 30. Now, the reason we wanted to talk, one more slide on the current situation. We also went to our industry peers and asked them about their fiscal situations. And you can see we received 12 responses, both from California agencies as well as agencies across the nation, of what they're looking at, when they're going to hit their fiscal cliff, and the type of initiatives they're looking at to balance their budgets. So we did get 12 responses. Like I said, 10 of the 12 are also facing fiscal cliffs. It is an industry-wide problem. 9 of the 12 are looking at fare increases. 9 of the 12 are looking at service reductions. 6 of them are deferring capital. 4 of them have looking for state or legislative assistance. 5 of them, primarily in California as well, are going for ballot measures, revenue measures in 2026. And there are some other revenue initiatives that people are pursuing. Nothing in that list of other revenue initiatives was anything that we have not thought of at this board level. There is a table that talks about all different funding options in the agenda item attachment. So just want to give you a flavor that, I mean, this is something industry-wide and everyone is doing basically the same tools that we have at our disposal. We want to break this down into 4 separate decision points. The first one is the revenue measure. So we had direction to looking at going to November 2026, but as of right now, it doesn't seem like that is going to be feasible. We don't have enough time to really put this all together. And there is some question about who would drive that. If MTS drives it, we need a 2/3 vote. If we had a citizens initiative, we could do less, but we're not sure if that's realistic at this time. So we think we should push this back to 2028. I mean, a revenue measure would still be a significant infusion of recurring revenue that would allow MTS to maintain current sales and even expand service levels in the future. It also allows us to do some large infrastructure projects as well. So we still think it's a good idea. We just don't think we have enough time to get it all ready for 2026. We also like doing a revenue measure because it lets the public have a say before significant changes to fares or services happen. So if yes on this, we plan to pursue the November 28 ballot measure, continue the COA, expenditure options and public outreach to design that plan. And then if that was approved by the voters, we would begin receiving revenues in 2030. Now, our plan today, we run out of funding in 2029. So to do this, we really need an additional $265 million to balance the operating budget through fiscal year 30. We could always not plan for a revenue measure. We do have funds in place, as I mentioned, to balance the next 3 years. We do have the COA underway right currently. So the following decision points probably still be required, looking at external funding, looking at capital, looking at non-service operating budget changes to stretch out to start solving our unbalanced budget. We also have the FAIR study underway that we present to the board in the spring. So all these things will continue to going along, but we really need to start planning now of how we're going to bring those revenues and expenses in alignment. The next decision point is the capital improvement program. We already planned on taking 35 million from the capital program in FY27. We want to increase that to 50 million, and not just for 27, but also for 28, 29, and 30. This is just a high level direction. We don't have specific project decisions at this point. That will be made annually and approved by the board when we bring the capital to you every year. We would still have approximately $90 million in capital. So we're not totally decimating the capital program. We still have money to do things that need to be done. We'd just be able to do less each year. We always look after competitive state and federal grant opportunities that would help provide additional funding for the capital program, because most of that funding goes towards capital projects versus operating projects. And staff recommends this regardless of the ballot measure, because we really need to do this to start getting our revenue expenses in alignment. So what would this look like to the CIP? It would start with the battery electric bus side. We would continue to delay the ICT implementation. We already have funded infrastructure. South Bay is completed. We have a plan, a project in place for Imperial Avenue Division and Kearny Mesa Division, where those are already started. So we will finish those projects and have battery electric buses at those two divisions as well. We will also plan on purchasing battery electric buses for that infrastructure, charging infrastructure, once it's completed. So all that's in place, and that will use existing dedicated funding, not using our flexible funding. And then any further investments in this arena would require additional either dedicated funding from the state or the feds, or competitive funding from the state or the feds to really expand this program any further. That would be all the second phases at all the divisions. That would be additional battery electric buses for those second phases of charging infrastructure. It also would include the clean advantage transfer. We can't do that without dedicated funding from other sources, because we just can't afford it with our existing funding. The other impact to CIP will be on the stated good repair side. We are not planning on any impact to the Orange Line Improvement Project that is underway. We have a couple more years of that need to be funded, and that will be funded as a priority one. On the revenue vehicle side, we'll start reducing the number of buses we're replacing, and that will start in FY27. We're going to replace 22 less buses because of the service we have on the street doesn't require the number of buses we currently have. And then outside of those IED and KMD battery buses I talked about, we would plan on future buses plus purchases be C and G until we can afford to do more charging infrastructure projects. We're going to also look at extending our current fleet useful life. Instead of 12 years, look at 13 or 14 years would help us reduce the number of buses we could be purchasing as well. So those are the types of things we'll do on the revenue vehicle side and the bus side. On the trolley side, we were supposed to begin saving for our next round of light rail vehicle replacements. So there is 11 vehicles that were put into place for Mission Valley East in the early 2000s that are coming up to be replaced. We would delay that for now. We do have enough vehicles to manage our service levels today, so we don't think we need these right now based on service levels of today. The remaining capital funds, like I mentioned, we still have $90 million to spend. We would just look at a new stated good repair prioritization, not only what things that have reached their useful life, but look at the condition of those assets and see what really needs to be replaced that current year and delay things as much as possible. We would also look at our project funding requests and try to match those project funding with the actual expense revenue stream on the outside, not just park money in the capital, and really look very strategically how we can program that funding that's going to go out the door when we program it, and try to lower the overall CAP that way as well. Like I said, this will be brought back to the board each year with the capital improvement program, and no project decisions are made today. The next decision point is on the operating budget in general, and this is not talking about service at all, just the other pieces of the operating budget. As Gordon mentioned, we did have some favorable trends in fiscal 25 that we think are going to carry over. We'll be looking at that next forecast very soon. We will continue to pursue any non-fair revenue opportunities to try to increase those revenue shares. We will only look at essential repairs and services in this upcoming budget cycle. Anything that's nice or new or not necessarily need to have, we would need to delay those things for a few more years and just look at really what needs to be done today. We talked about this at the last board meeting, but there are a couple self-funded pension opportunities on the San Diego Transit side. One would be changing the UAL amortization from 12 years to 20 years. That would lower that annual payment. We could also look at the discount rate being increased from our very conservative 6% to maybe 6.25%, 6.5%. Either one of those would save money. They don't have to be done together. They're independent, but you could save $5 million per year for those type of things. And we'll bring a recommendation back to the board in February when we bring the actual report to the board as well. But the goal here would be to target about $10 million in annual non-service savings in the operating budget, beginning with this next budget cycle to help ratchet down our expense trend. Again, all these decisions we made, operational decisions, will still go through the normal budget development cycle. We're not making decisions today. It's just general guidance we're looking for. Lastly is external funding. We've been pursuing every avenue of how we can increase recurring funds for MTS. Right now, there is no recurring funding sources on the horizon. The TDA Transformation Task Force has looked at their things a lot of different ways, but are not proposing to make any changes to today's levels or change formulas. So nothing coming on the TDA side. The extension of the cap and trade at the state level that we usually get our TRCP funding from. It just preserves the status quo. It'd still be a capital intensive program. There's not going to be shifting any of that money to flexible formula funding. So there's no change there. That's going to give us a recurring revenue stream. And as of right now, nothing else on the federal side or state side that's new that's going to help give us a recurring revenue stream. So we have had discussions with Sandag, as we mentioned in the last meeting. Those discussions are basically around borrowing money. It's basically a short-term, give us money now, we have to pay it back in 3 or 4 years. So it really just kicks the problem down the road a little bit. It doesn't really solve anything from a recurring revenue standpoint. Both of those situations, whether it's either Transnet or federal funding, I mean, it does require payback. Transnet would require payback with interest. So it's not something that we're recommending at this point in time. But we will continue to pursue all opportunities in the external funding arena. Doing those few things we talked about there, that will not balance our budget through fiscal year 30. We will still have a gap over the course of the next 4 years that we need to generate. We are not requesting any additional specific direction at this point in time. Because we have 2 things that are going on that are on their own process, unrelated to our request here. One is the FAIR study that will come back to the board in December with an update, and then in the spring with the final recommendations. It'll come both to our board and the Sandag board, and also the COA that we've talked about. You've been hearing about that almost every month. The full process will be completed by TMD and brought to the MTS board in the spring as well, looking at both ways of adding service in an ideal world if we had a revenue measure, but also if we needed to right-size service, what that would look like as well. In the short term, staff will continue to look at service efficiencies. We are getting a lot of data out of the COA, so we are using that to sort of fine tune our services, and we can make minor service changes under policy 42 that we do every 3 months or so with our shakeups. And we want to quickly break that down for the board. Is policy 42 is the board adopted process for evaluating and adjusting existing transit services to improve performance. And it establishes procedures for implementing service changes. It also establishes a vision for a customer-focused, competitive, integrated, and sustainable system. And it also provides what performance indicators to use to analyze and performance targets that are established. So in the policy, it defines major changes versus minor changes. Major changes do require public hearing and board adoption. So that is when greater than 25% of a route's weekly in-service miles or hours is changed. That would be significant route realignment, schedule changes, or significant route restructurings. And this may result in reduction of benefits for some riders. So any major changes would require board approval and a public hearing. But what staff can do on a recurring basis are minor changes They do not require public hearing or board adoption. It's when less than 25% of a route's weekly and service miles hours are changed. It's minor routing adjustments, service maintenance, or optimization service. And these type of changes should not have a significant impact to ridership. So it's stuff that we look at every single 3 months to how we can optimize our service and make changes as we go. So with that, brings me to the staff recommendation is that the MTS Board of Directors provide the following direction to staff. It's move the target for our revenue measure from the November 2026 ballot to November 2028. And during the development of the fiscal year 27 through 30 capital improvement programs, include a shift of $50 million per year to the operating budget. Set a target of $10 million in annual operational savings, beginning with the fiscal year 2027 operating budget. That does not include changes to service. And then continue pursuing additional funding from regional, state, and our federal sources, including MTS, to pursue legislation to expand transit revenue options through tourism, luxury vehicles, or other options other than a sales tax. And with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
Yes, we do. Nate Fairman, if you can please make your way to the podium.
Nate Fairman, IBW 465, again, representing hundreds of your MTS employees, and I support this proposal by your staff. Look, I understand that some up here might find it difficult to get behind this, but I believe it's the right thing to do. I've negotiated dozens of contracts, a dozen, not dozens, a dozen contracts with MTS covering hundreds of your employees over the past 10 years. And we've succeeded each time. A lot of the times when we sit down and we talk about these issues, we've navigated often shaky financial footing. But each time we've succeeded as workers and as an agency by taking bold action to protect the long-term survival of public transit. I believe this is one of those times. Is now the right time to put forward a ballot initiative? I don't know. The polling says maybe not. Other coalitions at the city of San Diego, labor, and at Sandag are asking themselves that same difficult question, right? Maybe postponing it to 28 is the right thing to do. I know we need to do this, but timing, I believe, is everything. And shifting funds from capital investments to operations, it protects your internal employees like our mechanics. So we support that. But finally, the efforts to secure much needed funding through state legislation and grants, please reach out to us. The IBW will work hand in glove with MTS to secure funding like we have in the past. My phone is always on. Please reach out. We want to help. We want to support. The direction we take as leaders at MTS is often littered with personal opinions, forecasting models, and half-baked reports. But here, we are not dealing with opinions and forecasts. These are actual numbers. This is our actual budget, and these are actual deficits we're facing. This proposal by your staff helps soften the glide path and gives us breathing room to find stability and security. Stability and security that we need, and stability and security the public depends on. So I support this proposal by staff, and I encourage the board to as well. I'm also strongly opposed to the insourcing efforts by MTS that you're undertaking. I say let's put a pin in that. It's opening the door to labor disputes that I don't think anyone is really asking for. Thank you so much.
That concludes public comments, Chair.
Thank you. Let's open board discussion on the item. We'll begin with Director Moreno.
Thank you for the presentation. Can you go to slide 9? So, and just to reiterate, this is kind of the 5-year projection, we're looking forward type of deal, right?
Correct.
Wonderful. Okay. What is the existing amount that we have in capital improvement projects funding?
We funded $163 million in fiscal year 26. The overall projects available funding is a few $100 million.
A few $100 million.
Committed projects.
As we call them in the city of San Diego, encumbered.
Encumbered.
Right, encumbered. So in last I remember in the capital improvement projects for ZEB, there was about 350 million, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's about 200
million for battery electric buses, both the infrastructure as well as the buses.
Okay. I think it would really benefit this body to get this is the probably 5th time I ask for this, and I'll look at the chair. I think it would be important for this body to actually see the capital improvement projects and the list of line items that we have as a body. Because you're requesting 50 million to get moved from CIP to operations in this action today.
Future CIPs, not taking anything from our projects that already been funded.
And this we're trusting in your, like, not, you know, I trust you, but we don't have that information in front of us to look at it. And we've done it before. I'm not saying it's wrong or bad. You mentioned it, we did it last year as well, where we moved from capital improvement projects, I think it was 35 million, and we moved it over to operations, which I don't disagree with. The problem that I see is that we don't have the list before us. And I know most of the projects are state of good repair, and also our ZEB program that is kind of, with all due respect, it's kind of up in the sky, right? We don't know exactly where we're going to put the money. At least that's been my understanding of 7 years of being here. So I would request once again that this body get a full lay of the capital improvement projects, encumbered, not encumbered, all of that good stuff. Like I said, last thing I remember, it was about $350 million that we had in ZEB funding, infrastructure ZEB funding. I can be completely wrong, but I don't have it before me, so I don't know per se. But I will say that I agree with this strategy. I think it's a shame that we're waiting until 2028. We should have been ready for 2026. I had been asking as a board member for us to be looking into a potential 2026 ballot measure. Unfortunately, it sounds like we're too late, and a lot of folks, we're not ready, basically. And I think that's a shame for us, considering the budget, considering the previous item that shows that we're about $100 million, right, in the red. So I'm happy to make a motion to move staff's recommendation. Like I said, I am being very critical of the information that we're receiving. I don't necessarily disagree with it, but I think for transparency purposes, we need to have a list. We need to see where our capital improvement project funding is going. So thank you. That concludes my comments.
If I could, Chair, I just want to emphasize that when we do the CIP each year, we do have this kind of reporting. The zero emission bus transition plan is approved each year by the board. And so we present all of that at that time. This today is not to say that this will define what our CIP is. It's that subsequent action by the board. What we're asking for today is that you look at the overall overarching strategy that we've presented. Let us work towards that. And then when we bring forward in February or March, the CIP, we will include all of that information at that time. And you could say, never mind, don't take 50 million. So that is definitely where we bring that. And then in the approved budget each year, we do include information on the CIP within the budget. So if there are other action points, it's just tough to bring a lot of that information to the board when we're really just looking for this overarching strategy.
Which I don't disagree with, and that's why I put the motion before us. But I will state that for the record, I have never seen a capital improvement project line item encumbered, unencumbered. I've only ever seen the full amount. That is in, for instance, in the ZEB program. And I think it's good practice, even with our 5-year, I'm calling this a 5-year, but outlook item. I think it's good to see a capital improvement. Maybe we should change the capital improvement projects, not only to provide more detailed information. Let me state for the record, I've never seen a line item capital improvement project staff proposal. And I think that's a big problem. But bringing the capital improvement project with a 5-year is probably a better use of our time, considering that there is a $50 million request at this moment for us to hypothetically allow you guys or give you guys the blessing to move forward with. So I need more detail. That was my point in making the comments.
Thank you, Director Moreno. Let's go to Vice Chair Goebel.
Thank you, Chair. Let's go to slide 7, please. So this is talking about if this board moves MTS ballot measure forward. The wild card here that I haven't heard yet is what if there is a community or a citizens initiative? The board initiative would have a 2/3 threshold, difficult for any task or tax. But if there was a citizens initiative, it's 50% plus one. My question is, what kind of coordination or communication are we allowed to do if that happens, and what are we not allowed to do?
So, I mean, certainly that's a touchy issue. You know, I mean, MTS cannot be the driving force behind a citizens initiative. That has to be run by citizens. We can provide information to them. So if a citizens group wants to run an initiative, they can come and talk to MTS about, if we did this, how would you spend the money? You know, that sort of thing. But then there's also a certain point where then we're not allowed to talk, because it can't be an MTS initiative under the cloud, you know, of a fake citizens initiative. And so we will be very strict in any sort of communication that we have to make sure we stay on the right side of the rules related to that. So there is a certain amount of hands off, but we do need to make sure that any citizens initiative is clear so that if it gets passed, we know what it's telling us to do. You know, what are we allowed to spend the money on? What are those directions? And certainly to the extent that that group wants to clarify with MTS of, you know, if we did this, could you do that? You know, it's in the public interest for us to answer those questions. But we have to be very careful, because you can't basically have MTS drive something and just have then it could be subject to challenge that wasn't truly a citizens initiative.
So I'm hearing education is okay, advocacy is not okay.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Goebel. Director Bush.
Yes, thank you, staff, for the info presentation. Agree with my colleagues. On member or Vice Chair Goebel's point, because I was actually going to agree that I would have liked to see 2026, because there's always risk in 2028, because I think it was the last cycle, there was a bunch of initiatives. So if everyone's going to rush initiative, that just diminishes our chances of passing one if there's a bunch of other agencies or cities doing initiatives, especially with that 2/3 threshold. So I do want to thank Mr. Nate Fairman for coming and speaking and offering that, because if we're talking about a citizens initiative, hypothetically speaking, that is something that the citizens could bring up, and it would be a 51% threshold and not that nearly politically impossible 2/3 threshold. And I think of that, right? Because that 2/3, that's a really high burden. I have less of an appetite for that. If we are not going to, I would rather instead focus, if we're going to go for the 2028 date, I would rather us, or I would want us in 2026, this upcoming year, to work with groups like IBW and others, business groups, to work on state legislation to reduce that threshold to 55% or something more manageable. So I think that's more realistic. But I do appreciate the comments from Nate, and would like to hear more about the insourcing and the potential for labor disputes there, because we still do, I think, need to study that, because there's a lot of issues that we've had with TransDev and our private contractors I'm not going to get into right now, but definitely open to having that conversation. Everything else, I think, I agree and I think makes sense. But I will say that the Citizens Initiative, as much as we can, for an education standpoint, explore that for 2026. That might be a good move. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Bush. Director Hall.
Slide 6, please. I just saw you move it the other way. So we have, you said up to 6. I think I count 5 there, but going on the ballot in 2026. Are they all similar, or how have we done any kind of comparison on those and what they're asking for?
Might help us write ours. Initiatives, so they are similar, that it would fund whatever the agency wants to use it for. They've been planning this for a few years now for theirs.
Well, I'd be curious on how they're written versus how they end up too, especially if we're going into 2028. I know with us, we had the fire department, and payroll was part of that, or, and it got beat. We lost. So the reality is we need to kind of make sure that when we write these, it's more for where it's going to pass versus, and we're not going to write it anyway, but the fire department actually wrote it in our case, but it still failed. And so I just want to make sure that we have some kind of comparison that we can know what to do and what not to do, and at least give it an attempt at that point.
Thank you, Director Hall. Any further discussion on the item?
Chair, if you need a second, I'm happy to second. I don't know if someone already did.
You're seconding the motion?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion from Director Moreno. We have a second from Chair Pro Tem Montgomery Stepp. Seeing no further discussion, we will vote on the staff recommendation. Clerk, please call the roll.
Members, if you can please make the selections on your tablets. The motion passes with 13 members voting yes, 1 member voting no, and 1 member absent.
Very good. Thank you, Clerk. Thank you to the board. Do we have any board member or CEO communications? Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention to you that I ended my tenure as the California Transit Association Executive Committee Chair. And I look forward to having more time to focus on other things. But I also wanted to mention to you, I sent a board report today to update you on an LRV versus pedestrian this morning. If you have any questions, feel free to talk to me.
Thank you. Thank you for your service as chair, and congratulations on a very productive tenure in that role. Any other board member communications? Seeing none, I will just remind everybody that with the formation of the ad hoc committee this morning to recommend committee appointments for next year, if you're not on the committee, but you are particularly interested in serving on a particular committee or a committee, please either let me know or let somebody else who is on that committee know, so we can evaluate that as we're making those recommendations when we meet. We have 2 closed session items this morning. We have a conference with legal counsel regarding existing litigation, and we have a conference with labor negotiators. Clerk, do we have any public comment on the closed session items?
We have no public comments, Chair.
Okay. The board's next meeting date is on December 18th at 9 o'clock in the morning, and we will now move into closed session. Thank you.
Reporting out of closed session. Item number 21, closed session conference with legal counsel, existing litigation pursuant to California Government Code Section 54956.9 D1, Angela McGath et al. Versus MTS. The board received a report from legal counsel and gave instructions. On item number 22, closed session conference with labor negotiators pursuant to California Government Code Section 54957.6 regarding a employee organization, a Transit Enforcement Officers Association, or TEOA. The board ratified a tentative agreement with the TEOA covering a period of October 1st, 2025 to September 30th, 2028. That was reached on October 20th, 2025. The vote was 13 in favor with 2 members, Member Voss and Member Leiva Gonzalez absent.
The meeting has adjourned at 12:17 p.m.